Hey, just a heads up, I go a little bit faster in this video than I think I usually do. I'm not really explaining why I'm doing everything. I'm just kind of doing certain stuff. It's nothing we haven't talked about elsewhere on the Patreon, and so I'll try to list some relevant videos below if you're curious about any of that, or I'll check the comments, try to respond if there's anything like what, how does that work? But yeah. It's coming along. So yeah, this episode is actually getting very close to being done. Although I just went on a little detour for the past couple weeks, trying to finally, and I know I've been talking about this for years, but finally figure out the proper linearization workflow with Resolve and Blender, and maintaining those values all the way through the pipeline, so that by the time I get it back into the final grade, the CG and the CG live action mixtures matches the original camera stuff, so I regraded everything, using what I've learned, and things with black levels and all that are just, to me, they feel a lot more tangible. But to everybody else who sees it, they're like, Ian, this looks exactly the same. And I'm like, no, trust me, it's different. I've also been working on this sequence here, which I think turned out pretty good. And it's the first time we kind of see the downtown area in the distance. And I drug my heels on modeling the downtown area for a really long time, because if I'm going to be hand modeling a city, I want there to be something like unique about it. Otherwise, why not just get an asset from somewhere or use a picture of a real city, photo bash it together. But I couldn't really wrap my head around what I wanted it to look like, because if you type in sci-fi city into Google, you see all these crazy, very, very sci-fi kind of, anime, cyberpunky cities, and I didn't really want that. I wanted it to be almost a little bit boring. I just kind of wanted it to be an enhanced version of like downtown LA. It's just, yeah, it's the place off in the distance, but I did want it to be a little bit enhanced with, just exaggerated verticality, and I think I walked a pretty good line here of all the colors, and kind of everything's just a little bit exaggerated. Like there's this weird blue line along the coast. Anyways, it used a bunch of different techniques, and I want to do another shot, which is basically the city across the harbor I can use for the background of a different sequence. So I thought maybe today I'll kind of walk through how I made these buildings, and we'll mix and match a bunch of different techniques and see if we can kind of like hack together a view of a distant city. I'm thinking maybe like a little Coney Island kind of pier with like a Ferris wheel and all that to kind of give it a little bit of life and fun. And yeah, let's give it a shot. So first, I'm just gonna model a couple little regular houses here. I think I kind of want there to be 3 different tiers. I want there to be like or maybe just 2 small buildings kind of in the foreground, and then big buildings sticking up out of that, and then kind of like a detail kind of level on top of everything to make it actually feel lived in instead of just a bunch of copy and paste stuff. So yeah, I'm just gonna model some structures here. This will be like a sign on top, and then I'm gonna duplicate this object and use this as the starting point for the next one. And I'm only really worried about the silhouettes here. That's really the only part that we're gonna be seeing. Let's see, this one we can delete the sign, and so the only bits that really matter again are this top area, and there's only so many ways you can make a square look interesting, so we don't have to stress out about this too much. Cool, so now I've got all these different building objects, and again, I'm really only worried about the silhouettes on the top, because we're going to be scattering them around. So I'm going to take all of these and hit M, put them in a new collection. We'll call this small houses, and let's see if we can figure out how to scatter these with geometry nodes here. So I'm going to make a plane, I'm going to scale it up, yeah, Control A, apply the scale, tab into edit mode, and subdivide it a few times, and let's try making like a little, turn on proportional editing, make a little hill kind of area. Yeah, and actually let's delete some of this like that. Slide open a new panel. Let's go into geometry nodes. Yes, you are geometry nodes now. So right now what it's doing is it's taking the incoming geometry, which is this, and it's outputting that same geometry. That's great. Let's distribute some points on this. I'm mostly doing this just to try to familiarize myself with geometry nodes a little bit more. So we're distributing the points. Let's actually join whatever we're doing here with the original geometry, so we keep that ground plane. Cool. And we've scattered all these points. Let's have it be less dense. Let's do maybe like 0.02. See how that looks. And on top of these points, let's instance things. Instance on points. Yes, yes, great. Okay. And now we can literally just drag our small houses collection down into here. We've got that. Let's separate this out. Make it relative. Drag this into the instances. We want to check pick instance, otherwise it'll do the entire collection on every single point, which can get very heavy very fast. And right now they're all intersecting the ground plane, so let's just go into the small houses here. I'm going to select all of these, tab into edit mode, and just bring them all up a little bit so that they're kind of on top of their points. Yeah, they're on top of their origins, that is. Turn these back off. Let's turn up the density. Oh, yeah. And can we rotate these buildings kind of random? Already that's looking pretty good. Yeah, let's rotate these buildings. So random value, we'll make it a vector here. Plug the random value into the rotation, and I'm going to make both of these 0, and this one will be 1. So now it's only rotating along the z-axis, which... Actually, let's keep it kind of more square. Here, we'll just turn that back down, and that's... Yeah, that's feeling okay. And we can do the same thing with the scale, too. Make this float, drag that into the scale, and from like 0.9 to like 1.2. Let's set up a camera. So I'm not really trying to make an entire 3D scene right here. I'm just trying to make what looks like a decent view of a city. So we're going to be going kind of just fast and making sure it works from the camera's point of view. So if we go to a wider view here, so I can pull down some of this foreground stuff, maybe pull this up a little bit too to frame in the shot, bring these guys down. Although now it feels a little bit too perfect. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So next, let's create some water. I'm going to create a big plane here. I'm kind of just trying to see what we can get done in an hour, mostly. I didn't really have a big plan for this one. Except to see kind of... I'm using all these kind of different techniques. Let's make this be... We'll just do glossy. We'll just do basic glossy water right here. We'll maybe make it a little bit darker. And let's actually jump into... Well, first let's save. City view. Great. Now let's jump into rendered view already. I'm going to set the world to just be kind of a dark kind of blue, and that's working pretty good. Here, let's actually go into the small houses. I'm going to give one a slightly darker material here instead of just white. Select that cube, select all the other ones too, and hit Control L, link materials. They should all be darker now. Great. Let's select our ground plane down here and give it a material too. I don't know if this will actually work, but if we make it emissive, yeah, that totally works. Here, we'll make that a little bit warmer, because I'm only really worried about this area, and now it looks like there's kind of lights coming up from the streets. Let's see. Do we want to model the skyscrapers in the distance? Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so for this, I'm not really gonna worry about having everything modeled to scale. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball everything. So let's create a cube, and the way I kind of came up with for making buildings that felt kind of sci-fi but weren't like too over the top was just cutting some corners off of kind of regular buildings. So we've got our cube. I'm going to give it a mirror modifier here, turn on clipping, bring them back together. Now whatever we do to one side will happen to the other side too. Pull this up so it's a good kind of building shape, and I'm going to create another cube and just eat away some chunks using booleans here. And now if I use the bool tool, select this, shift click on this, control negative on the numpad, and bring this above the mirror modifier, it'll happen on both sides and it'll feel kind of interesting. Here, let's do that again, but just along this entire front edge, maybe slanting in slightly. Bring that up above too, and maybe just one more time, kind of coming up from below like that. And what's cool about the mirror modifier is it's going to make everything feel a little bit intentional, because if something's symmetrical, it doesn't feel like you're just doing things randomly. I don't really like that, but let's try kind of swing it around onto the back here. And here, let's go to the bottom here. I'm going to select this edge, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then tab out into object mode, right click, set origin to 3D cursor, and that way the origin is at the very bottom of the building, so when we scatter it, it should stick to the ground better. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to Shift D, duplicate this, and on one of them, I'm going to apply all of these modifiers, so it's just this object. I'm going to hit M, put this into a full, another finished buildings folder, turn that off, and now I can just move all these cubes around into a new orientation and get a new type of building. So yeah, ooh, nice and pointy. That's ugly. I love it. Cool. Duplicate this one. Apply all the modifiers with Control A. M, move that into the finished buildings, and add another variation. Gonna pull these down. Use objects that maybe aren't perfectly square here. Like we can just pull up this, but keep this kind of slope going. Yeah, that's looking kind of interesting. And here, move that into the finished folder, and let's have one that is just a really boring kind of square. That's probably a good idea. Not everything should be weird all the time. Well, maybe just a little weird. Okay, now we've got all of our finished buildings, all just kind of randomized squares like this. Let's take a look at what we got. Whoa, we made a lot of them. That's pretty good. And yeah, they don't feel like they're all just the same shape. There's some variety. Once you randomize the scale and rotation, I think that's gonna work fantastic. Okay, so to make them look like actual buildings, there's a lot of different ways we could go about that. I kind of just want to do it a little bit lazily. So here, let's give all of them a first base color here. We'll just call this base color. Yeah, make it a little bit dark. Again, I'm always erring on the side of everything being too dark, so that the points of light and the silhouettes are kind of what's defining everything. I don't actually want to model an entire city. My goal right now is you get the silhouettes. Everything feels a little copy and pasty, so then you just go in and you add specific details in different areas so that there's still something to look at. Okay, so base color, select all of these, and Control L, link materials, they're all have that dark base color. Ooh, see, already that looks great. That's got some good city vibes. I'm gonna go into edit mode for one of these objects, select everything, and hit I to inset. Double tap I, and we can inset every individual face here. Then if I hit Alt E, extrude faces along normals, we can pop everything in a little bit. You might have to get a little more granular down here with this slider. I'm gonna go over and create a new material here and assign it to the selected faces. We're gonna call this like Windows. Great, and let's do that for basically all of these. In fact, can we do all of these at the same time? Select everything, tab into edit mode, double tap I, Alt E, extrude faces along normals, and just bring in everything in just a tiny little bit here, and create the new slot. Windows, assign. And okay, it only does the materials for the to one object at a time, but we can still go in and do that by hand pretty easily. And we could obviously do the same thing we did with the other buildings and scatter these around and make a little downtown area. In fact, let's do that. I'm going to select all of these buildings, copy them into a new folder here, maybe scale them up a little bit, put them in their own folder. This will be called like downtown buildings. Yeah. And already that feels pretty cool. We've got them in their own folder. I'm going to turn off that folder. I'm just going to duplicate this object here and make this its own geometry nodes instance. And we're just going to replace this node here with our downtown buildings group. Separate everything here, drag that into instances, and now it's a big city instead of a neighborhood. Delete all these faces. Gonna hit Shift A, make a new face, and we'll just make a little horizon. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so we'll have that like that way in the distance, and then we'll have another kind of piece in the foreground to kind of sculpt things a little. Make sure the water goes all the way to the horizon. And this glowing plane is still doing quite a bit. It's still just giving everything that kind of glowing from below feeling that I think is pretty fun. Let's try doing something to randomize the scale here. Like we can just randomize this quite a bit and get some more variety. But let's see if we can do it so it kind of follows like I want there to be dense clusters of tall buildings kind of together, like there's different districts. So let's delete this. I might actually turn the density up like to 0.2. I want to see a bunch of buildings. Just create a new noise texture here. Drag it up into the scale, and if we make this scale here like 0.1, do we kind of see yeah, that's kind of working here. What about like 0.05? And let's put this through a what is it? Do they have color ramps in a? Yes, excellent. I need to do more stuff with geometry nodes. But we can take this white and make that white be like 5, and everything will be huge. We can control the distribution of how things are on these points. That's a little bit too big, but if we do like 3, that's kind of cool. And if we turn up the roughness, we can kind of control the randomization of all of that. Let's see. Let's make this be 4. And I only want a few very bright buildings, so I'm gonna even divide this and bring these down. So here we go. We've got a couple tall buildings. We turn up the distortion just a little bit. Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for. And here, I'm gonna make the black not be black. I want it to just be. There will always be little buildings in there. Maybe turn our density back down a little bit. All right, and now I really want to start getting into proper textures. But let's copy this guy here and try to build like some small shoreline buildings, just kind of to hide the seam between the tall buildings and the water. I want to kind of have this little lip of smaller stuff. So maybe I can just copy one of these faces here, delete all the other ones, and extrude it along like this, like that. Do the same thing over here, and maybe pull it out a little so we get kind of, yeah, an extended shoreline. Pull up some of this stuff to make it kind of feel like it's got hills. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. This edge right here is maybe too bright. I might make this a new material here, and we'll call this like blue underglow. And we'll get some color separation between the foreground and the background. I want to give these buildings that too. In fact, I wonder if it'd be kind of cool to like have the outside of the city be one color, then the inside be an even more kind of intense version. Like if we went to, ooh, this is kind of, yeah, all right, that'll be fine for this. And now we've got the outer buildings are blue, inner city is kind of this green. And just restarted Blender because for some reason the denoiser keeps crapping out when I use Blender for too long. Let's give these small houses slightly more of a texture here instead of just this flat black. So under the shader editor, I'm just going to apply some random texture. Let's try this classic right here, and I'm gonna change it to generated and from flat to box, so everything's just projected, and that looks even worse than I expected. Let's see if we can find something even less distinct. And this is where obviously I'm running into the limitation of I'm trying to make a town without actually modeling buildings, and at some point for this crime you are punished, and I think that time is right now. But here we'll do this. I'm going to use an RGB curve, just darken this whole thing. And that's fine. I mean, again, what you'd want to do is you want to actually add, give each of these 7 buildings some sort of attention. It wouldn't be all that hard. We're just not going to do that right now. Here, let's create a volumetric cube and just cover all of the low-lying areas here. We're going to add a little bit of fog and see what that does. Here, make it so it's not super tall, just kind of covers all of the low-lying stuff. Give it a new material, and in the shader editor here, I'm going to delete the principled, create a volume scatter shader right into the volume, make the density 0.02. Ooh, and that's feeling interesting. Let's turn up the anisotropy. Turn the density down even more. Turn the density down even more. Yeah, that's feeling okay. And I don't like that we can see the lights here on the ground in the foreground. So here I'm actually going to put the volume. We know that's going to help the final image, but I don't want to always be accidentally clicking on it. And I could just turn on the restriction toggles for selectability and make it so you can't accidentally click it. But instead, it also slows down the whole viewport. So I'm going to just put it in its own M new collection haze, and we can just turn that collection off and on as we want to. All right, I'm going to go into solid view, tab into edit mode. I'm going to make this entire row here just be a new material. And if I wanted, I could apply like a road texture to this just in case if we did see it. Something like that, and hit U, unwrap, and the UV editor. Make it be nice and big like that. And what does that look like? It looks like nothing. That's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. And we could here. Let's see. So here's the warm underglow lights. If we go into the shader editor here, that's a strength of 4. We could create another noise texture, plug that into the strength, and if we could change the scale to go down, plug it through a color ramp here, and we'll make the brights be 4, and we'll make the darks be black, and now if we wanted kind of those lights, just they have a little bit more randomness kind of going on. And that means let's actually make the bright areas even brighter. And when you combine that with some haze, it actually casts a little bit of light kind of up from there, and you get these little this feeling of neighborhoods. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Okay, let's stop stalling. Let's finally create some materials for these buildings here. Let's go into our downtown buildings and go to the windows, and right off the bat, let's turn the roughness all the way down, make the base color be dark, and let's make the buildings even darker. Again, I'm mostly just curious about the silhouette, but we do want to add some windows and stuff going on, some little bright lights. Even though in reality, when you look at a distant city, there's just a million windows everywhere. I feel like that's almost too, it just is going to feel like noise, so I want to be a little bit more reserved, as if you're only seeing the very brightest windows. And for that, let's just literally load in a picture of windows. And this is where we could spend, days just trying to make the ultimate city window texture map that can be copied and pasted and augmented and all that. And you have all these, we can make little window generators and randomizers and everything, and so that it all with a slider to control the lights that are off and on. I've done kind of similar things in the past, but I don't want to do all of that right now. Let's see if we can get away with just using this one picture here on the entire city. This has a lot of windows on, and so I think we might be able to get away with, or maybe even this one right here. I think we can get away with turning some of those windows off. Okay, so we don't want to apply this based off of the size of the building, because the buildings are scaled all over the place, and I don't want the windows to be smaller if the building's smaller. Here, actually, let's plug this into the emission slot so we can really see what's going on. So instead, I'm going to use the coordinates of an object, and we're just going to add that object right here, cube. And here we'll go into solid view so we can actually see it. So the object, we get to pick it. It's right here. And ideally now, if we make this be box applied, yeah, we've got our windows coming in from every side here. We can scale this up. And right now it looks really uniform, but we're just going to layer some other bits of randomness on top of it until you can't really tell that it's uniform. So here, let's create a brick texture here using these same kind of mapping nodes going into the vector. And if we preview what that looks like, it's on the wrong axis. So let's try rotating this 90 degrees. Yeah, that's looking okay. I'm going to turn down the mortar size. That's the kind of the black line in between everything. I'm going to turn the gray to black. And if I turn down the scale here, we can get kind of these flatter, longer areas, as if different floors of the building are off or on. And we can do that on. Control the scale here too. I'm going to plug this through another color ramp so we can decide, how much we want this to affect everything. And we're going to multiply these values against the windows. So wherever it's black here, we're going to be getting rid of the windows from here. So we'll use a mix color node here set to multiply, and we multiply these values. It's already feeling significantly less copy and pasty. Yeah, that's going pretty good. Here, let's turn the emission strength up a little bit. Where there are windows, I want them to be doing a thing. So yeah, I'm just gonna multiply this entire brick texture thing, and we're gonna do another one, but at just a different scale. Here, we'll plug these in like this, and so we're gonna just daisy chain them. If I change this scale. And cool, yeah, now it doesn't really feel copy and pasted at all. Here, we'll turn down those downtown buildings. Let's make this city bigger. I'm just gonna grab this back edge and kind of expand it into the distance. We got these buildings. Let's use them. I want to add a sky. So here, F3 images as planes. Got this old pack of dramatic skies, and ideally, I want something that feels like it's being lit from below, like the city's actually casting some light up onto the clouds with the light pollution. We may not be so lucky, but let's try something like that. Set it to emit. I'm gonna just put it in the background. Bright areas just down there near the horizon, and in the shader editor, where is it? There we go. I could just turn the emission strength down to like 0.05. Yeah, that feels okay. Maybe turn it up to like 0.15, and I want it to be a little bit more yellow, so I'm gonna multiply in some yellow here to really make it kind of match the city a little better. Maybe turn up the value, turn down the saturation. Another thing we could do here, let's go into the downtown buildings again. I'm gonna grab whichever one looks the most square. Yeah, that one. Here, we'll go into local view, and I'm gonna grab one of these lines, maybe one of these lines. Yeah. All right, so Shift-D, duplicate all these edges, scale them up a little bit. I'm gonna hit P, separate by selections. Now they're their own object, which means, come on, let's grab it. Come on! There we go. Gonna add a modifier and a skin modifier. We have to make sure that every one of the edges has a root. So if we go back into edit mode, we can select like these vertices down here and say mark root. Now each one of these edges gets skinned. Control A, we can make that a little bit skinnier here. I'm going to apply this modifier to make it actual geometry. Give it a new material. Here we can delete this, and we'll call this like neon. And best way to do this, I think, would be off of geometry. So here, let's go create a geometry node, and we can get, for every piece of geometry, we can get a different value right here. What I'm wondering is if a lot of times I would randomize based off of like the object that it is. Like every object has a different color, but if it's all going through geometry nodes, does it all count as one object? I think it might. I think it might all be borrowing the values of the overall object. So I'm hoping that this randomizes things a little bit. I'm going to drag the random per island into the surface, and let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so now each one just kind of has a slightly different value. I'm going to run it through a color ramp and turn it to constant. We'll divide this up into like blue and this will kind of define the feeling and the color scheme of the entire city. Like we can just make it so these are the only colors that'll ever exist, and we can control the probability that one of them is even on to begin with by how much the black is occupying. But now ideally, if we select our neon here, select our building and hit Control J to join them all together and go back into our main area, we should get a lot of these kind of vertical lines scattered around. Okay, so they are all blue, which means let's go back into here and try it on the object random instead and see if that. And okay, yeah, now it's working. We've got different colors kind of in there. We've got our a little bit of green, a little bit of the pink. Here we can add just white too. White is good. Shrink all this up a little bit. I don't want to overdo it. And we can use a mix color node here to make them even brighter. Multiply by like 3. Cool. We're gonna turn our little collection back off. Yeah, that's feeling pretty cool. We turn our haze back on. Ooh, we get our low line stuff. I feel like you can really see that it's just kind of this flat object, and that's because we're right along the top of it. If we move it up so we're not quite on axis, I think it'll feel a little more natural. And the building lights work okay up at the top. I think I actually want to have them really bright down at the base and get darker as they go up, because by the time the buildings get to the top, I'm more interested in the shape they have as like a city skyline silhouette, and I want the base of it, the city itself, to feel really dense. So let's see if we can kind of dial that in, turn our buildings back on so we can select one, and let's create a gradient texture going from the top to the bottom. Here, we'll plug this color into the emission so we can see what we're doing. Control T for the mapping nodes, and if we rotate one of these 90 degrees, you can see it goes from black at the bottom to white at the top. We can control this to be whatever we want. Let's swap these like that. And so the base will give a value of like 3. That might be a bit much. And the rest will give a value of 1. So the base will be extra bright and everything else will just be kind of bright. And if we plug that into the strength of the emission and our windows into the color itself, I think it's working. If we move this around, you can see the windows do something. But here, let's try just really exaggerating it. Let's turn this up to like 11 and this down to like 0.5. Yeah, okay, that's working better. Maybe we'll keep it at 1. I can't really see anything. But yeah, you can see now when we control this, that controls how far up the lights go on the buildings. That's feeling good. And okay, so far I've been very good, and I haven't used any pre-existing assets, even though that's exactly what all the assets are for. But I think most all of this stuff is stuff I've shared on the Patreon before, and the stuff I haven't, I'll try to get uploaded in the next couple days. But let's first go and use I just released this one. It is a volume haze ball. Which is just here. If we look in the shader editor, it's an emission shader that goes into the volume of the shape, and so it's actually the inside of the shape that's glowing, and it's being controlled by a quadratic sphere gradient texture, which is mapped to be at the center of the cube. So if you copy these settings here, you should get something that looks kind of like this. This is just to control the fall off, make it feel a little bit more natural. And you can control the color just right here by changing the emission shader. So if I stick these off in the city center here, oh yeah, let me scale it up. And here, let's add another math node just to multiply everything by like 0.1. I want it to be very dim. 0.02. Yeah, that's pretty good. And I should figure out a better color. I think, yeah, something kind of bluish green. I don't want to overdo it. And wherever this yellow is coming in from, I think I'm gonna make that be purple. Ooh. So yeah, this haze ball is doing quite a bit to kind of sculpt the space. I think I want to make it skinnier so that the buildings will play with the silhouette a little bit better. Let's do another foreground one here for this little building cluster in the foreground. And here we'll make it its own version of the material so we can make this be a little bit warmer, kind of a little foreground zone. These buildings in the foreground are feeling a little bit sparse, so I'm going to select this plane and just add a few more in here. Wait until we get a nice big one doing something. Yeah, that's feeling better. Okay, let's add our cool lights to the shoreline. F3 images as planes. This is some stuff. One of the first assets I actually ever uploaded. So yeah, I just filmed this in my town. It's of the Navy shipyard across the harbor, and I went down on like a hot summer night, so you get extra heat shimmer going on. We'll import this. And again, this is one of those things that'll make it so it only really works from this camera angle, because this is just a flat texture on a 3D city, but as long as it's lined up in the right place between the camera and the background, it should all work okay. I'm gonna plug the video texture straight into the surface through an emission shader, and we're gonna add the values of that to the values of whatever's visible behind it with the transparent shader, which basically gives you kind of that add blend mode, which I always think is pretty cool. And if we line this up with this little glowing bit of shoreline, let's make it even brighter. Let's go. Yeah, right now you can kind of see the edge a little bit. So let's use color gamma and just raise the gamma a tad. And let's stick it in the background a bit too. Back here, line it up. And what's kind of interesting is, like, you can see the lights are casting these long, in the video footage, these long trails downwards. And as this intersects the water plane we have going here, they just kind of keep going into the digital one, which means let's actually select the water plane and turn the roughness down, and I think we can get them to blend pretty darn easily. Turn the color up a little bit. But I think at this point we can see this glowing edge of the underlying geometry a little bit too well. So I'm going to go into the geometry node editor here and just use a set position. And so ideally we can just offset all of these, slide all the buildings over so that they're hanging off the front of that plane, which kind of breaks up that a little bit. Yeah, that's feeling better. Do you remember when we made a little blinking light asset? I use this all the time. It's if you look up blinking light asset, you will find this in the Patreon, and it just appeared as a house, which means I probably accidentally drug it into the small houses collection. So let's hit M, just put it in the overall collection. Under the shader editor here, I'm gonna make this red. And let's turn off the haze, and let's use the snap feature here to snap to faces. And now I can just put it at the tops of these buildings. Here, scale it up a little bit. And ideally, each one of these lights will just kind of be blinking independently, adding a bunch of life to the overall city. Really give it that kind of LA look. And a couple weeks ago, I filmed a new version of this video texture when Lux and I were driving out to Yakima to scan a bunch of tractors. Let's try loading that in. It's called the new large twinkle. Yes, and try to scale it up. It is just a bunch of twinkling stuff of the Yakima Valley. You can see all the lights are actually twinkling and shimmering, which is going to give anything, anywhere we put it, a bunch of actual that feeling of life. If I stick it down here, it almost kind of fills in this area so it doesn't feel like it's water. So maybe we lean into that. And, oh, I accidentally overwrit my my other harbor texture here. Let's fix that. So yeah, maybe we'll have this background be a proper shoreline, and we'll just use this video texture to imply that there's a whole kind of like land area here. I don't know if this will work, but here, let's see what happens if we try to, ooh, that's good. And I want to put it in the foreground too, in front of some of these buildings, and see if it's too much or if that kind of makes that feel a little bit alive. Want to make that its own material. Turn the strength way down. Just keep it nice and dark. Here, we'll just use this little patch of foreground stuff right here. Tab into edit. Oh, it's everywhere. Okay, that means we're still bringing stuff into a different collection. The small houses collection. Oh, all of this stuff should not be in the small houses. Let's grab everything and bring that out. Okay, there we go. That's more sensible. I do that all the time. I accidentally put something into one of like the house collections, and then it is scattered a million times. I'm like, why are things being weird? But here, now we can just cut these pieces out. I just want to leave this one bit right here. Invert the selection, X delete faces. These red lights here, they feel a little bit cartoony. I think they're all instances of, well, they're not even anywhere. They're just floating. Well, that's okay. If I shrink one, does it shrink all of them? Yeah, it does. And okay, let's turn on the saturation of this. Maybe make it a little bit orange, just a tad. This little bit of purple here, no longer love it. Let's make that be warm. Yeah. And cool, that looks better than I expected, honestly. This is the stage where I'd start going through and adding little posters and, you know, little chimneys with smoke coming out and billboards off in the distance. I still want to kind of add that Coney Island Ferris wheel type pier. Just things to look at. Different logos on the tops of buildings to make it feel like there's actually stuff going on. A few custom neon signs kind of doing something or another. But what's cool is because these are all video textures, if we render this out, everything would actually be shimmering and feeling really alive. All the lights would be blinking on top. And we even have a little bit of parallax we can play with. The fact that the video textures are kind of just floating in midair is a little bit weird. We could kind of project those back onto geometry and make everything work a little bit more. And so if this were like the background of a scene where some characters are standing on a rooftop, you could actually, you know, get a little bit of 3D kind of going on. But yeah, sorry if I got a little bit fast and loose, but hopefully there's something useful in there, and I will talk to you soon.